So welcome to a CALPADS and assessment webinar. This is actually the second time we are doing something like this. We did one of these a couple of years ago, and it was quite successful. But we haven't touched base on these in a while, and it came to our thoughts that there's a lot of CALPADS administrators and a lot of LEA testing coordinators, both on the CAASPP and the ELPAC side, who may not have a good understanding of how the data between the two programs works and how they are intertwined and how we actually need you all to work together. So we're going to walk through today. We're going to spend an hour with you, giving you a ton of information. So please buckle in, be prepared. We're going to give a lot of it to you. The questions can be added to Padlet today. We have closed down the chat and the question and answer part of the Zoom in order to focus all questions into one area. I know Tyler has put the link for the Padlet into the chat. I'm going to ask him to do it again because I don't know if everybody who's coming into the room can see the links that were posted prior to entrance. So we'll put that in there. We'll actually put it in a few times throughout the day so that everybody has access to it. The nice thing about the Padlets, you can ask questions. You could answer questions if you know the answers. But the other nice thing about it is, unlike a Zoom call, our Padlet will stay open. And afterwards, if you are watching this or if you're going back through notes and you have questions, please keep the link for the Padlet available to yourself. You can post a question in there that pertains to this particular webinar, and we will get a notification anytime somebody adds to it. So we will make sure that we are answering them as we can. Also in the Padlet is a list of the acronyms that we will be using today. We're going to go over them shortly, but we will have them in there so that as we go through the webinar, if all of a sudden we throw out an acronym that you're not used to, you can look in Padlet just to catch what it is. And then the slides will be available in the Padlet after the session, and next week we will have them onto our CAASPP ELPAC website. We're under the upcoming and on-demand training page. So on November 25th, we will post those. We are recording this. The recording will take about a week to maybe 2 weeks because of the holidays to transcribe. Once it's been transcribed, that recording will also be posted for everybody to view. Quickly, I'm just going to go down some acronyms that we're going to talk about today so that you have an idea. ADAD. We're going to introduce them. If you have not met ADAD, that is the Assessment, Development, and Administration Division of the CDE. CAA, California Alternate Assessment. So anytime you hear CAA, we're talking about the alternate assessments for science, for ELPAC, for math, for ELA, for the students who cannot take the general assessments. CALPADS. Hopefully we all know what CALPADS is if we're in this webinar, but if you don't, California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System, that is the mainstay of our data. That is, you all feed your data into CALPADS, CALPADS feeds us. CAS is the California Science Test. CDE, California Department of Education, should be one everybody's very familiar with. ELA, anytime we're mentioning it, it's English Language Arts and Literacy. ELAS, English Language Acquisition Status. So that is the current status of our EL populations. Are they an English learner, English only, initially fluent, or reclassified? We'll talk about those. ELPAC is our assessment, the English Language Proficiency Assessment for California. That is the assessment that students who come in and based on the home language survey are determined that they need to be assessed whether or not they're proficient in English. They'll take the initial, and then until they become marked as reclassified, they will take the summative version every spring thereafter. IDEA is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. LEA, Local Educational Agency, that's all of you. MID is a multiple identifier. We will be talking about those today with the way that it works with CALPADS. SBAC, Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. That was an acronym used quite a while ago. It's sort of gone quiet, but that is our ELA and math side of the assessments. Going on from that, we have SIS, which is your student information system, such as PowerSchool, Aries, or whatever system you are using at your LEA. SSID, statewide student identifier. Everybody should be familiar with those numbers. STARS. Now, this might be new if you are a CALPADS administrator. STARS is the Security and Test Administration Incident Reporting System. That's within our system for testing when we have to reset or make changes to something that a student has tested because of mostly issues with demographics and such. TDS is short for Test Delivery System. TK, Transitional Kindergarten, and then finally TOMS, the Test Operation Management System. So CALPADS has their system on their side of the house. TOMS is the system that ETS uses to collect the data from CALPADS, and our LEAs use it to get their students assessed. Our agenda, we're going to go into introductions, talk about why we're here, talk about how the data moves, what are MIDs, the proper steps for merging and retiring SSIDs, locking demographics and TOMS, students in TOMS but not active in CALPADS, conflicting ELASs between active and retired SSIDs, mid-year grade changes and reclassifications, and then, if time allots, we will take some of the questions from the Padlet and we will talk about them right here on the webinar so that you have it. Okay, so let's jump into this. Let's do some introductions. I know it seems odd that we did all that before doing introductions, but we were trying to let everybody get into the room before we got started. So I'm happy to say that from the CALPADS office, we have Thor View and Sarah Yassin. From ADAD, which is the assessment department, we have the Assistant Director, Chad Portney, and then our managers, Judy Yang and Tracy Albee, and their team of Devin Triplett and Scott Fitzgerald. From our side of the house on the ETS program side, my name is Bob Martin. I am the Director of the Outreach, Administration, and Security for ETS for the California Project. We have our two managers on here, Christine Mott and Jeff Hogue, who also work with me. They pretty much run the entire part of the outreach side of the house, including our call center, our success agents, our webinars and trainings. Under that team, we have Tyler Shakwa and Cyan Bastians and Vincent Hamadil. They are the people who put all that work out there for you and get you the information you need and get you the trainings. And then from our IT side of the house, we have Ben Iams and Sri Lankalapali. I hope I said it right. I've been trying to practice that. They are on our IT side of the house, and they're all in the background today answering questions for us on the Padlet. So as you're putting the questions up there, you now have some names and you know who's answering your questions. Why are we here? We had to bring everybody together because when testing was in the past, back when I used to sit in the chair of an LEA coordinator, CALPADS was its own section and testing was its own thing. The two hardly had to deal with each other. As testing has become computerized and it's on computers for remote and for in-person, and we have started taking all of the information in from CALPADS into our system so that we can actually assess the students in the proper levels and with the proper settings and such, the two programs have really come intertwined with each other. And I am really happy to say, and I know my team teases me about this, but I'm also very excited to say that over the last 3 or 4 years, the relationship between the CALPADS office, ADAD, and ETS has grown immensely. And we are now constantly, every single day, working with each other to help LEAs. Our job is to help the LEAs to be able to do their assessments, to get their data into the state as best and with as little stress as possible. And it's been wonderful. We use teams within ourselves, and we're constantly working with one another that if an LEA has a question, we make sure we get them the best answer and figure out how to fix anything that has to be fixed. So because that relationship has flourished the way it is, we're now hoping that we can spread that across the state, that we can get CALPADS administrators and testing coordinators really working together and understanding how their data goes back and forth together. We're going to explain how CALPADS and TOMS data actually moves. We're going to talk about how incorrect data can lead to STARS cases and possibly to the point where a student might have to take a test more than once in that year because of something not set properly and not having that communication to make sure that the students can do what they need to do.
And Bob, I just want to let you catch your breath here for a minute. And
Okay.
I want to point out to folks that, because I'm already seeing some questions about when will this be posted, all of that stuff. If you pull up the Padlet, which Tyler has put a link to it in the chat, Cyan put a message up there telling you exactly what's coming, where it'll be posted and when. So the slides will go to the Padlet right after this webinar. On Monday, we'll post the slides to the CAASPP and ELPAC website. And then it's approximately about a week for us to turn captioning around to get the transcript posted with the video. So approximately 1 week, maybe longer because of the holidays. So I just wanted to reiterate that because I know we had some people coming in after we mentioned that.
Fantastic. And actually, I see the numbers are still going up, so we'll probably have to say that again. And as you can tell, I do truly appreciate my managers because they know when I need to have a sip of coffee. All right, so how does the data move? Data comes from you all to begin with. You gather that data. And I want to say something. I was going to say this at the beginning. It sort of slipped my mind, but I'm going to say it here now that we're talking about the data and we have more people here. The first thing I can say is to every person who is on here from an LEA is thank you. You do not have an easy job. It is not easy in any way, shape, or form. I used to work with our CALPADS administrators all the time when I was still back in my district. It is not an easy job trying to keep all that data clean, all that data updated and accurate. So thank you for what you are doing. We truly appreciate that. And for the testing coordinators, we thank you as well because we test well over 3 million students each year. That could not happen without you all doing the work. So now what we're hoping to do is give you that understanding to make the job a little easier. So data starts with you at the LEA. At the LEA, your schools collect, your registrars collect all the information that is necessary in order for a student to be entered into the CALPAD system. LEAs upload that data and it gets sent to CALPADS. So everything you put together, all of that data has to be clean as it comes into us or as clean as possible so that we can then transfer it over and start our assessments. So from CALPADS, every single night, CALPADS sends us, every single night during the week, CALPADS sends us the data that they have received from you all during the day. All the changes, all the new students, all the exits, all of that information comes to us. Our system, TOMS, processes that data and enters it into the demographics areas so that when your testing coordinators, when your site coordinators go into TOMS, they can see the updates to the students. They can actually see what information is in there and if students are ready to be tested. TOMS, after processing the data from CALPADS, then sends it to another system, our TDS, our test delivery system. Once that data is into the TDS, it is at that point that students can be assessed. That could be initial ELPAC, especially in the fall when everybody's being enrolled in schools, your initial ELPAC students. And then later in spring, as students come to you or leave you during the spring, all of that happens and it affects all the way down the line to the end where it's the test delivery system. Now, we have a little bit of a surprise here today because we have new information for the testing coordinators that only just came out this week. So in the past, it would take it would take about 48 hours in order for a student to be enrolled before they could actually be assessed. We have been working diligently to try to cut down that time, and our team over here has done some incredible work. So now here's the new timeline. If a student is enrolled today into your LEA and you put that student into CALPADS and it goes up to the state and it's now part of the CALPADS system, tonight that data will come to us just like it always would in the past. It would come into us and it would be processed. Here's the big difference for our testing coordinators. This is really more for the testing coordinators at this point. It no longer takes another night for that information to get over to our test delivery system. So we now have it set up. CALPAD sends us the information late in the evening, in the early morning. We process it, it automatically, right then and there, goes into the test delivery system, and then that student, after about 8:30 in the morning, can be assessed. So now a student can enroll today, they can be assessed tomorrow. It's no longer that 3-day period. All data currently in CalPads on day one, by the end of the day, will be sent. We've been talking with our CalPads counterparts, and we're saying by 9 o'clock Pacific time, if you have information in CalPads, that information will be sent to us. And then by 8:30 in the morning the next day, all of that's up and through and into the system, and you can assess your students. Thor, do you have anything you want to add at this point about the movement of data?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Thanks, Thor. I just needed a sip of coffee.
Bob,
So-
we did have a question come in that I'm hoping maybe Shri can help us answer, because I don't know the answers to this, but the question is, does CalPads update to Tom's on Friday and or Sunday nights? Like, I think they're wondering, does it happen over the weekend?
Is Shri with us?
Yes, I'm on. I will get more details on that one and answer it.
Okay.
Thank you, Shri.
I know one of those 2 days, but over the weekend, typically, we don't do every day over the weekend. Okay, so we have our movement of data. Now, before we go into the mid-resolution, if we can go back to the other slide just so it's up there. Here's the information that we really need to put out there for everybody. Especially now that we are moving data faster. We need to be concerned about what's going into TOMS. So when students are enrolled and entered into CalPads and that information is sent up, tonight it's going into TOMS. So students now become active in TOMS. However, certain things can stop a student from being able to be assessed. If the CalPads record for some reason is not accepted because of conflicting information or some reason that it does not get taken into CalPads, that student obviously would not be processed. If a student is brand new, say, to the country, and they've done the home language survey, and they have marked that they have a language other than English being spoken primarily at home, LEAs have 30 days to test their students. One of the factors that we find can stop or slow down this process is making sure that all of the fields are correct in order for the student to be assigned to ELPACs. Because our test registrations, for the most part, when it comes to initial ELPAC, they're automated. We don't have to touch them. We don't have to tell our systems how to do it. But in order for us to automatically assign a student as an initial ELPAC student, 3 things have to be in there. They have to have a language other than English or American Sign Language entered into the primary language field in CalPads. Notice how I said that, other than English or American Sign Language. If they have American Sign Language in CalPads, they will not be assigned to the initial ELPAC. If they have a form of sign language outside of American Sign Language, they would be assigned to the initial ELPAC. They need to have the ELAS, the English Language Acquisition Status, set to TBD. And then the other one is not mandatory for an initial ELPAC assessment, but is needed for these EL students. And that is the initial entry into a US school. The reason that one comes into play is if a student is in country less than 12 months when it comes to taking the summative assessment, they will have an exemption for the ELA assessment. But if we don't have a date in that field where it says initial entry into a US school, and I know I'm not saying the title exactly right, but I think everybody knows the field I'm speaking of. If there's no date in there, then the student will never receive that exemption. So it will affect not only, these fields will affect not only the initial ELPAC, but they also will then come down the line and they will affect what a student has to take in the springtime when it comes to ELA. So if a student is less than a year by April 15th and the date is in CALPADS, CALPADS will give it to TOMS, and TOMS will automatically set it up so that the student does not have to be assessed in ELA. Now, testing coordinators, please remember, it doesn't mean they can't be tested. It means they don't have to be tested. There's a slight difference there. So I hope everybody's understand that. But we need those fields entered in so that we have them so that they can be used to assign the initial ELPAC. Okay. So one of the biggest things, and we'll move on here now, one of the biggest things that we have that happens is when CALPADS administrators enter data into and send up to CALPADS, there is a, and Thor, help me out with the wording here. Is it a program? Do we want to call it a program or an application that they use?
It's a process. So the mid resolution, it's a process. It can be found in CALPAD. I'm pretty sure everyone's aware of. It's in the anomalies management menu. That's where you can go to find your mids. And I just want to add that it's it would be ideal if LAs could resolve mids within a few days to help TOMS to mitigate issues in TOMS, and then however I noticed working with the CSIS services is that LAs are using mids to LAs are assigning SSIDs to existing students and then using mids to resolve mid issues. However, we are trying to encourage LAs to use the SSID match tool. It's just been enhanced and it's constantly being enhanced. So please use that to identify existing students so that you don't generate more mids.
And Thor, the SSID match tool is used prior to the entry of the student?
Yes, so it's used to identify existing students. So what it does is you provide a center file to CALPADS. CALPADS spits back out some results of potentially matching students, and then LAs can go through that file in their SSIS to identify if it's the student, and then use that SSID instead of giving a existing student a new SSID.
Okay, wonderful. And that's beneficial to everybody if there's a possibility that we can find, or I should say you all can find, that the student already has an SSID out there and should just continue using a previously used SSID. It prevents and it will avoid quite a number of issues down the road for us. Now, if the match tool has not been used, then we have our mid resolutions. And this is a tool that is used in order to tell the CALPADS administrator, hey, you have students in here who you gave an SSID to, but they may actually already have been in the system and they may have this SSID available to them. And I have not seen the tool, but my understanding is that it does a side-by-side comparison for you so that you can really look at the students to see if, yes, this is the same student, I should take care of this and combine these two, or nope, two different students, and I can just let it go. I will tell you, we work with Thor and Sarah constantly, multiple times a day. And every once in a while, we started doing this last year because we were curious and we asked them, and they would send us the number of LEAs that had mids that had to be run. And we started sending out emails to testing coordinators that said, we know you don't have anything to do with this, but please talk to your CALPADS administrator to see if they should be running this and if they should be combining or merging some SSIDs together. Because the longer you leave these alone, the bigger the chances that a student will be tested on an incorrect SSID, and then we have to go through a number of steps to try to move testing around, move scores around, move ELASs around, and such. So the sooner you can check these under the anomalies, do the mid and check to see if you have everything nice and clean, the better. And we do have links in here that when we post the slides, you'll be able to use the links as well. Testing coordinators. Here is one of the areas that I wanted to speak to you directly, because your CalPADS administrators are trying to upload students and get them all uploaded. Where we saw this year, I think more than we have in the past, was you were doing a fantastic job of saying, I have new students, I have to go test these students. I have to get the initials done. We have 30 days, and we understand that. But it's in your best interest to communicate back and forth with your CalPADS administrator and say, hey, have we checked? Are we 100% sure all the SSIDs are good the way they are? Because if you take that extra moment, if you take that extra step and just do a confirmation with your CalPADS administrator and say, I need to go test students, are we good? It's going to save you a headache down the road. Because if you jump right into that testing, if you jump right into that initial ELPAC testing the second day after a student has been enrolled and you have not given your CalPADS administrator that time to check, there's a possibility that student may have been enrolled at another LEA last year or earlier this year, and they didn't tell when they were signing up for your LEA, they didn't bother to say, oh yeah, we're coming from another LEA, here's what our numbers were. So it's going to then cause your CalPADS administrator is going to have to do the merge and everything, but prior to that, you're going to have to do some more work as well. So please, it's really in the best interest of both sides of the house, talk with each other, make sure that the SSIDs have been resolved and everybody has their own. I will speak from my own experience when I was at an LEA. This was before testing was 12 months of the year. And the testing was mostly, as far as computerized testing, was all in the spring. I used to pull from our SIS, I used to pull from Tom's, and I'd have my CalPADS administrators give me a report, and I would do some work for them, marrying it up and finding out if we had conflicting information. And the more we worked together, the cleaner our data was, that by the time we got to testing, we were good to go with very few, if any, of these situations. So work with each other, say, hey, we're going to be doing testing. Is everybody good? Have we checked all this information? And have we converted and merged? Christine, you're popping on, so you must have a question.
This one's actually for Thor. This person's wondering, can school site secretaries, enrollment staff have access to the SSID matching tool?
I believe it's in the user manual that will show which roles are needed to use the SSID match tool. And
So it's in the user manual?
yeah, so I could probably find it. If it's in the question, I'll find it in the user manual. Use it. And
Perfect,
post
thank
the
you.
answer. Yeah.
Okay. And Christine, I will tell you, I see our teams popping up a bunch of things, but I'm not watching. So if any other questions need to be answered, by all means.
Will do.
So I don't want to take this topic deeper or longer than I need to, but I will tell you, the more work done in this area, the cleaner the data is that goes up to CalPADS, the cleaner it is that it goes into Thomson and the testing system. So this is your first line of defense right here. And we can't just say, hey, I waited and I didn't bother to check with my CalPADS administrator, but hey, it was in Tom, so I should have been able to do it. That communication back and forth between your two departments is vital. So what happens if we have had a student come in, they got a new SSID, they took the initial ELPAC, or they took another assessment on that new SSID, and then lo and behold, we find out, hey, they had an SSID from a year past or earlier in the year, and we need to push everything back over to that. Here is an area, again, where communication is going to be key. And if you haven't caught my drift here, my motif here, but communication is number one. Communication between everybody is going to save you headaches down the road. Where we see a lot of issues after it's been discovered that you have a student with 2 SSIDs and you need to retire one of them and move everything over. The biggest issue that we have is CalPADS administrators will see this and say, okay, I've got to do my job. I've got to clean these kids up and get everything taken care of. it is in the best interest of all of you at your LEAs to find out if there has been any testing done this year on that new SSID. So if I had a student that was at LEA number 1 last year, they came to me LEA number 2 this year. Mom and dad didn't say to us, oh, this student was already over in this other LEA. They just say, we're bringing in our student, and they fill out the home language survey so that it marks them as needing to take the initial ELPAC. Well, the problem is they may have already taken the initial ELPAC at their last LEA. Now we're giving them another initial ELPAC. And then it's discovered, whoops, this student already has an SSID. Prior to doing any work on the CALPAD side of the house, it is in the best interest of everybody if you reach out to the LEA coordinators for both CAASPP and ELPAC. They may be the same person, or they may be 2 different people, but the 2 or 3 of you should be working together, and you should reach out to them and say, hey, I'm going to have to merge these SSIDs. Did anything happen that you need to take care of before I clean up these SSIDs? Is there anything I need to do? So in the example I was giving, student already took the initial ELPAC last year at the old LEA. That means prior to doing anything, I need to remove the testing that the student took this year. I have to enter a STAIRS, and in this case, because we're talking about initial ELPAC, I have to enter a STAIRS for every domain that the student took, and I have to reset the test. That'll do a couple of things. It will reset the test and it will wipe it out, and it will also take the ELAS, the English Language Acquisition Status of that student, from EL or IFAP, whatever was in there, and it'll set it back to TBD. Once all that's been done, then go ahead and do your merge and retirements and such. That will allow data to flow properly. What would happen then is when that SSID retires, the data should flow properly, the ELAS should flow properly, and things should go to what they're supposed to. If the SSID is retired prior to any of this work being done, then we end up having to go in and do more in the back end, working with LEAs to clean it up, because once an LEA has a retired SSID, that retired SSID becomes inactive in TOMS. So at that point, the LEA cannot do any changes to that SSID. But in order to get everything correct, the LEA then has to figure out what is wrong with the student, how they need the student to be, and then they're going to have to reach out to a success agent who can reach out to our internal teams and say, hey, we need to have this done. We need to get this corrected. So here's the things to check. Has the student completed any initial ELPAC domains? Has the student started any summative assessments? What is the ELAS of the original SSID? You need to know what that student was prior, and I'm going to talk about that again in a second. And is the SSID connected to any other student? Because as we've seen in the past, there have been times where we have one SSID being retired, but then the second SSID is actually connected to a third student, and then they have to pull in a different student, and it can get really convoluted and messy for us. Hold on one second. Thank you, Cyan. So I do want to talk about the ELAS of the original SSID, because here's the other issue we run into. Look at what that ELAS was of the original SSID, because technically, and I'm not sure if Tracy's on here with us, but I know she would want me to speak to this. The student needs to have the ELAS that they had from their first SSID. And here's where that can get tricky. If in their first SSID, in the first SSID at LEA number 1, if mom and dad said, my child only speaks English at home, that student would be EO, even though they came to yours and said, no, they speak Spanish or Chinese or some other language at home primarily, you still have to go back to that EO status, because that is the ELAS that is connected to the student. Tracy, do you have anything to add about that?
No, just that I think that when they're cleaning up the mids, that's one of the things that we need to ensure that they're doing those steps prior to merging. So I know that we're working on that, trying to get that communication out and working with CalPADS office to make sure that those steps are being done.
All right. I'm looking at my clock as we're looking here, so we're going to step it up a little bit because we do have quite a bit to get through here. And I'm hoping that this is all valuable information for you. So what happens after you merge or retire the SSIDs? You're not done. If you had a student who had multiple SSIDs and now you're bringing them down and you're giving them back to the regular SSID, it is up to the testing coordinators and the CalPADS administrators to work together to ensure that any testing that, say they were at LEA number 1 earlier this year and took the initial ELPAC, then it is up to you to check once all of the movement of the SSIDs has happened, that the testing has moved over to the correct SSID, or that the original test is still connected to the original SSID and the correct ELAS is there. If that ELAS is not correct, that could affect the summative ELPAC down the road. If the correct, if the date of initial entry into the school is not correct, if that has changed, that could affect whether or not they are exempt from taking the ELA. So yes, we have to do the merge, we have to move things over, but then it is up to the team at the LEA to confirm, are my ELASs correct? Is all the demographic correct? And make sure that you are doing this before summative ELPAC or summative CAASPP assessments open up, because once they open up, you start testing students and you don't have the right SSIDs or the right information, then we're talking having to do resets and possibly retest students or move students around. So to help your students when it comes to assessments, help yourselves when it comes to assessments, all of this prior to the summatives happening is in your best interest. So here's another big piece of information. In the past, we've only locked down a few pieces of demographics once a student has started any summative assessment. We just had, I believe, 4 or 5 fields. This year, to help have cleaner data when it comes to identifying where the students were when they were doing their summative assessments, you can see this list has grown quite a bit. And this information we are going to be getting out to the LEAs, so don't panic and go, wait, we didn't know anything about this. We are getting it out. We're putting our communications together. But now, instead of just a few, the grade level, that's always locked down. So once it's, and I want you to understand, when I say summative, it doesn't matter if we're talking summative ELPAC or the CAASPP or the CAST, CAA for science. These are all summative assessments, so that end of year assessment. Any one of these, a student opens up and starts taking the test, boom, these are locked now when it comes to TOMS, not CalPADS. Inside of TOMS, these are locked. So why do we care about it here? Because if we're going to lock these down, we really need to make sure prior to summative assessments that these fields, more than anything else, are locked in and accurate. Otherwise, in order to change anything, and there is a method to changing, we would have to do a reset of the test, allow the data to flow from CalPADS into TOMS, into the test delivery system, and then we would have to restore. So we're talking quite a bit of work again on the end of the LEA. We're trying to help you avoid that. So please, you're going to get these slides. They're going to be on Padlet. Take a look at these. Make sure we're looking at these and ensuring before your students start their summative assessments in January, February, March, April, or May, that this information is correct. Now, I will pull your attention to the last 3, primary language, date of birth, and ELAS. It has an asterisk on it. The asterisk denotes that this field locks with the start of the first summative ELPAC domain or summative alternate ELPAC. So those 3 don't get locked with CAASPP. So any of the science, ELA, or math, those 3 don't get locked for that. You do one domain, any domain in the summative ELPAC. As soon as that student opens it up, those 3 get locked. If the student's taking the summative alternate ELPAC, those 3 get locked as soon as the student opens it up. So again, best interest, make sure all of that is correct. I will ask Chad, Judy, Tracy, anybody from the ADAD side, if they have anything to add with this.
I would just reiterate, we're hoping to get cleaner data and give LEAs an opportunity to see what that data is before it gets into the final data file. So we hope this helps.
Okay. All right. So then we'll put this in the Padlet. You'll have it. Please keep this list handy and make sure you're ready to go when it comes to summative assessments. All right. Now we get into the confusing part. We hear from LEAs all the time. Hey, we took our student out of our LEA, and why are they still connected to us? Hey, this kid's still in Tom's, but this student hasn't been with us for a while. What's going on? So let's talk about that. What we have seen in the past, what we have experienced in the past, is the fact that sometimes students are made inactive in CALPADS or removed from an LEA in CALPADS, but it's not through an exit code. So for students to be made inactive in TOMS, in order for TOMS to understand that that student is no longer with you, they have to have an exit code and not just be deleted. And they have to have a correct exit date, the date the student left and not the date that you're updating the file. And there's reason for both of them. So they have to have an exit code and not just be deleted. I think one of the ones we see this most often with is students who are no-shows. The students are put into CALPADS that they're enrolled in the school and they're now students of that LEA. They come up through CALPADS, they come into TOMS, they go into the test delivery system. Well, the problem is, every night, not only does CALPADS send us a file that says, here's all the changes and here's all our new students, they also send us what we call an exit file. And in order for a student to be sent in the exit file, they must have an exit code. If the record of the student is just deleted, nothing gets sent to us that says the student is no longer part of this LEA. They just vanish from the active file. We don't look at the active file and say who's no longer here because we don't want to make assumptions. We look at the exit file and we say who left this LEA. So if they're a no-show, using the no-show code will inactivate that student and remove them from within your LEA, unless of course the testing window is open. We'll get into that. They have to have a correct exit date, the date the student left, not the date that the file is being updated, because if it's March and you realize that a student left you in November and it just never got updated and you put an exit date of March, you've just locked that student in. If your testing windows are open, you've locked that student with you, because what we're being told by the March exit date is that the student was there the whole time. If you put in the correct date of November, then it says the student left before the testing window actually opened up. So no harm, no foul, student's gone. So we need an exit code. It comes to us in the exit file. We go, okay, this student's no longer part of this LEA. We can do our due diligence. And based on the dates, we know whether or not to leave the registrations for the assessments connected to that student, connected to that LEA. TOMS does not automatically exit students or change statuses if the student is not in the CALPADS exit file. Now, please note the last part of that. Manual cleanup will happen. We do try to help LEAs when the student has just been deleted with no exit code. We do go in and we look at the active file, but it's not an easy process. And it does make us have to do an assumption. Oh, Johnny hasn't been with this active file now for 2 weeks. Must not be here. Fortunately, if we do remove Johnny and Johnny is supposed to be part of the file and comes back to us, Johnny would be reactivated and all of his data would still be there. But the problem is, if we just go off of deleted files every day, there can be an accident where a student's file might have been deleted inadvertently. And if that student's in the middle of testing, the next day they're going to come in and all of a sudden they're going to go to try to test and they're not going to be able to test. So we don't like to make assumptions. We like to follow rules. And our rule is the student should come to us in the exit file. So please, exit codes are essential in order to keep the data flowing in the right direction. If summative testing has started for the school, the students will be made inactive, but they stay connected to the LA and TOMS. I'm saying this one mostly for the testing coordinators because we get this question all the time. If your school's testing window has opened and that student exits, they stay connected to you for the counts. The only exception to this is if the student is enrolled in another LEA. So if student moved from your LEA to LEA number 3, and it was within days of it, or even if it was within a couple of weeks, then that student goes over to LEA number 3 and comes off your records. But if that doesn't happen, if the student goes to a private school, if the student moves out of state and he or she was with you when the testing window opened and they were there when testing started, they will stay with you. Even though they'll go inactive, they will stay with you. The other one that has come up quite a bit for us is this year, I'm sure all of you know this by now, but I'm going to put it out there. This year, by law, we no longer test TK students with ELPAC. So TK students, up until this year, for the last few years, we were doing initial ELPAC and summative ELPAC assessments on TK students. This year, because of the new law, CALPADS no longer sends to TOMS students who are enrolled in TK or preschool. We only receive students who have a grade level of kinder through 12. If they are not a K or 1 through 12 student, they don't come to us. And a lot of times we are getting questions by LEAs. They said, why is this kid in my TOMS? This kid is a TK student or a preschool student. Well, at some point, that student was enrolled as most likely a kindergarten level student, or possibly a first or second grade student, but mostly it's a kinder, especially with this year with the changes and everything else like that. They were enrolled as a kinder. They came through CALPADS into TOMS, into the test delivery system. And then what happened was the LEA realized, oh, no, this student's supposed to be a TK or a preschool. And here's the catch, because they're not leaving your LEA, the grade changed. And typically, that's not a problem. However, that student stays inside a TOMS because they came to us in an active file. We don't have an exit code for them. Back in August or September, I don't remember the dates, CALPADS did a wonderful thing. They put together a process that allows CALPADS administrators to exit the student and then re-enroll the student as a TK. And what that does is it cleans up your testing file, so it cleans up all your students. If you are not familiar with the steps that they are giving out to LEAs, it's in Flash number 286. And I believe I already saw it pop up that Tyler has put into the chat that Flash for you. It's in your best interest, if you can, to make sure that if a student is moving from kindergarten down to TK, to follow the steps within Flash 286, and that will remove the student from TOMS. Now, again, for students who are already in that situation and they were moved and they're already down into TK, we will be doing manual cleanup. You should have by now seen most of those fall off, and they should be outside of TOMS already. But we should be watching for that. And if you see a student who is TK, then you need to talk with your CALPADS administrator or CALPADS administrators. If you're moving students, please follow Flash 286. I also want to point that in the very top bullet there, we say LEA should confirm the grade level of students and age prior to enrollment. This year, and I think more than in the past because of the new law, we saw quite a number of students come into us with at the age of 4 being enrolled in kinder and then immediately being moved out. But unfortunately, the timing was a little slow and they came into our system. So watching those steps also will help keep clean data. If you have a student who is enrolled as a kinder level student or a first grader, and you have decided that that student has to go down into the TK or the preschool, check before doing the exit code, check with your testing coordinators and say, did you do any initial ELPAC testing with that student? Because what has to happen is that student has to have the stairs cases entered and have those tests removed prior to following the steps in Flash 286. If you exit the student without having the stairs to remove the testing, then that student's going to stick around because they have an active test, and we do not remove students who have an active test. So again, communications, we're about to do this, we're going to move these students. Are we good? Yeah, you're good. We had to do a stairs, but now that kid has had their assessments reset, so they're good to go. Go ahead and put them down and do whatever's in Flash 286 to make that happen. All right, we're down to the last subject, mid-year grade changes and reclassifications. This one causes issues mostly when we are, well, actually only when we're talking really with the summative assessments, because things lock down, demographics lock down. So let's talk about what happens. A couple of years ago, a new law came in allowing for the movement of students and grades during the year, and it's wonderful. It's great for the students, not so great when it comes to your assessments because students get locked. And all of a sudden, you've had a student taking a summative assessment, and I'll give you an example. You have Susie is in grade 11 and is taking the summative ELPAC. So Susie starts the summative ELPAC. All of those demographics we talked about a while ago locked down. One of those is the grade. Susie finishes the summative ELPAC because it's in February, and then in March, she has gained enough credits to become a senior. So you want to move her into the 12th grade level for CALPADS. Well, that's great. That'll move. The problem is, inside of our testing system, Susie's grade has been locked as a grade 11, which means Susie is also registered to take the ELA and the math and possibly the CAASPP, depending on whether or not she was registered for such. You can't change Susie because that summative ELPAC test is sitting there and it's locking it down. There is a way to work this. So again, if as a CALPADS administrator, you coordinate with your testing coordinators and say, here's the kids we're going to be moving, be prepared, you may have to do some stairs cases. Once the grades have been changed in CALPADS, and you can see that in Tom's because it'll say grade in CALPAD, grade for assessing, they won't match. And what you can do at that point is you can take and put in a stairs for each domain of the summative ELPAC, have the test reset. Once it's been reset, demographics get opened up. Susie's grade changes from 11 to 12. And now you do a restore because Susie's testing within or is within the same grade band for the summative ELPAC. So you can do a restore. She doesn't have to retest. Her answers come back and now she's scored as a senior. And on the other side of the house, if she has not taken the CAASPP, she will automatically be registered to take the CAASPP, but her registrations for the ELA and math are now gone. And that's how you can make demographic changes for things that are locked. It's called a reset, allow the demographics to move, and a restore. But if you don't know as a testing coordinator that the grade changes are happening, you don't know to do these. So again, communication is the key. And I'm sure you're tired of hearing me say that, but it really is. So summative ELPAC and summative alternate ELPAC. If the same grade span, if the student is staying within the grade span of the ELPAC assessment, so 3 through 5, 6 through 8, 9 and 10, 11 and 12. And I hope I said those right, Tracy. 3 through 5, 6 through 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. If the student's grade change is within the same band, it's a reset, grade changes, restore it. If the student is moving to a different band, so now we're going to say Susie was 5th grade, move to 6th grade. You have to reset her 5th grade ELPAC, allow the grade to flow. Now she's marked as a 6th grade student. All her registrations will change accordingly. And unfortunately, in this case, she will have to retest the summative ELPAC taking the 6th grade assessment because it's changing the bands of the summative ELPAC. For CAST, SBAC, CAAs, ELA mathematics, all that side of the house, if a student changes the grade and they've started their summative assessments, you have to do a reset for that assessment that they've started, wipe it out, and once the grade changes, then you can retest the student in their new grade. So a stairs must be completed for each part that has been started, and you actually say use administered incorrect assessment, and then it'll give you the option to say the wrong grade. And then you will have to, for ELA math, you would have to retest them under their new grade. If they are talking about the CAST or CAA for science and the students in high school, that is the only side of CAASPP where a restore can come into play, because a high school science test is the same for grades 10, 11, and 12. So if they were a 10th grader, you can reset the CAST or the CAA for science, move them to 11th, and then do a restore. They don't have to redo the science. But ELA and math, they would have to test again at their new level. Okay. Students reclassifying after February 1st. We beg. We send out emails asking if a student had a 4 in the 23-24 summative LPAC or a 3 in the summative alternate LPAC and for the 2023-24 administration, please be working with your schools to see if they should be reclassified. If you think they're really close to being reclassified and that they'll hit it before the end of the year, hold off testing those students. It's in your best interest. Hold off testing them. And if you get down and you're within the last 3 or so weeks of testing and they are not going to make it, then you can test them. It makes it easier, because if a student does take the summative LPAC, and we see this quite a bit. This is one of our largest stairs cases, at least in my opinion, one of our largest stairs cases, is the fact that students at their school sites are given the summative LPAC, but at the district level, they're like, wait, we're going to reclassify that student. We're going to reclassify it, but it's too late. They've already tested them. If that reclassification is to go through, you have to do a stairs. You must complete a stairs for every domain that student has started or taken. Clear it out, and at that point, the new classification, the RFEP, will flow from CALPADS into TOMS. If you don't do that, if you have tested that student, and even though CALPADS says RFEP, and TOMS still says EL, and you've tested that student and you have not done resets to clear out the domains, you will get an SSR, which means you now have to base where that student is off that new SSR. So if you don't want to have to go down that route, make sure you do the reset prior to scoring. Make sure that you cleared it out and that the student's not going to get an SSR. All right, Christine, we have 2 minutes. What do you got?
So I want to take an important question because I want to avoid people having some frustration after this. But the question was, can CALPADS coordinator contact CalTAC? And the answer to that is no. Our phone representatives and our success agents do not have access to CALPADS, so they're not equipped to answer specific questions about that. So you still need to direct your CALPADS questions to the CALPADS support desk, and then your success agents and CalTAC representatives on the phone can help you, with Tom's questions and other test type questions. I wanted to make sure we got that one in, Bob.
Well, and I appreciate that, because we have been seeing a lot of gray going on with people reaching out to CalPADS about testing questions and reaching out to us about CalPADS questions. We work really well together, and we don't just throw those questions away. We work with each other and say, hey, we got this question. But it really is in the best interest of our teams and for your teams if CalPADS questions go to the CalPADS help desk and testing questions come to either our phone center or to your success agents. Tyler?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. First of all, since we're at 3, I just wanted to mention, I think that we're going to stay around as long as we can here, but for folks that might need to hop off immediately, I just wanted to mention that we are going to keep this Padlet page up, and hopefully if there are any questions that we haven't answered yet, we'll try to get to those throughout the rest of the day. So check back if you haven't received an answer, or make sure you check it if you did get a written answer in Padlet. The question though that I wanted to bring up to you, Bob, was there was just a little bit of confusion around the new sort of timeline for getting information into CALPADS or uploaded, from CALPADS, and then when you need to get it in there so that by the next morning it is in TOMS and then in the TDS. So one of the original slides I think said end of day, and while I think it can often be kind of later in the evening when that actually gets pulled, I think I've heard 5 p.m. as like the best cutoff date to list as the safest time to
Right.
get that stuff in. Is that right?
So as a coordinator, I wouldn't do anything after 5 p.m. However, Thor and I were talking prior, and he's a lot nicer than I am. And he was saying, you know what, if they can get it in by 9, we can still make sure that it gets sent over to Tom's. But I'm going to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, run with the 5 o'clock. I know Thor is trying to be really nice to everybody here, but if you run with that 5 o'clock time and always think end of day, 5 o'clock before I go home, then you're going to be spot on. You're going to get that information sent over. And I think Shri has something to add there.
Yes, Bob, that was my intent when I said it's 5 p.m. end of school day.
Yeah, and I think that's a good cutoff for other things besides just student information like test assignments. You want to try to get those in by 5 p.m. also, so that can move over. And I'm gonna use that as a shameless plug to say that we should be covering all of the system kind of timing stuff in our pre-test training that's in a couple weeks. I'm actually making sure with some of these recent changes that all of that information is up to date and as accurate as possible. We have a few slides where we'll go over all the system timings in our pre-test trainings. The first one is December 3rd, the week after Thanksgiving, and I'm going to put the registration for pre-test in the chat right now if you are not already signed up.
And nothing is a shameless plug when it's going to give them information. So
yeah,
love it. Did we have any other questions? Did anybody see anything on Padlet, and that's any of our panelists, anything on Padlet that you'd like to bring up? I haven't even looked at Padlet. I can't even imagine how full it is.
There's a lot. Let's see.
Looking like everything's been answered, Tyler, or in the process of being answered?
Yeah, a lot of it. So there were a lot of questions about does CalPADS have anything to do with accommodations and test settings and the whole SACE to TOMS thing. So we answered a lot of those saying that is a separate process.
Ooh, with
But it might
one
be good-
exception.
Okay, go for it.
The one exception is if you want to add accommodations to a student in CalPADS, you must have the special ed identifier. And if you need to move them over to an alternate assessment, you must have the disability code in CalPADS. Otherwise, once those things are inside of TOMS, the test settings and everything else like that, that's a whole different process. And I'm sure we'll have another webinar talking about test settings.
Yeah.
I just love webinars. So I'm going to leave everybody with this. It seems like we're answering the questions. It's a Friday. It's the Friday before Thanksgiving. So we want to let people go and do their holidays and everything. But I said it, I don't know, 100 times. The key to everything, the key to all of this, the key to getting clean data from your LEA to CalPADS to TOMS so that students can be tested, so that teachers aren't stressed out, that coordinators aren't stressed out, that administrators aren't stressed out. The key to everything is communication. If you let your LEA testing coordinators know, hey, we're making these adjustments to these students, can you check to make sure we're good before that happens? That's wonderful. If testing coordinators can stay on top of those requests from their CalPADS administrators and take care of any stares or such and come back and say, go for it, clean up the students. That communication is probably the most important thing that we can get out of this webinar, is having everybody talking together. And yes, I'm going to end this by saying the same thing that I always bore my team with, but if you ever watch the old musical Oklahoma, the farmer and the rancher can be friends, and that's how it is now with CalPADS and testing. CalPADS and testing coordinators can be friends. Buy each other chocolate or coffee or whatever, and just have a great testing season. And with that, I'm going to say goodnight and happy Thanksgiving to everybody.